The last thing Marcus Webb ever filmed was something he said he didn't put there. He had been working on the film for 4 years. No studio money, no distribution deal, no crew after the second month. Just Marcus, a camera, and an empty house in the high desert of New Mexico that he rented for $100 a month from a man who no longer wanted to go back to it himself. The film was finished on a Thursday night in October. By Friday morning, Marcus Webb was gone. Not dead, not hospitalized. Not reported missing immediately, because the people who knew him assumed he'd gone somewhere to decompress after finishing. Artists do that. You spend 4 years inside something, and when it's done, you disappear for a while to remember who you are without it. But Marcus didn't come back in a week, or a month, or a year. His car was still in the driveway of the New Mexico house. His phone was on the kitchen counter, fully charged. His wallet was in his jacket pocket, hanging on the hook by the door. His bank account went untouched. His passport was in the drawer where he'd always kept it. He had left behind everything that would have allowed him to go anywhere. He had left behind everything except himself. The people who knew Marcus, the small circle of independent filmmakers and artists he'd stayed in contact with over the years, described him in the same terms when later interviewed: dedicated, private, increasingly remote during the years he was working on the film. One friend, a sculptor named Callie Renner, said that in the last 18 months of production, Marcus had stopped returning calls altogether, not out of hostility, more like he had gone somewhere that phone calls couldn't reach. She said the last time she spoke to him, about 6 weeks before he disappeared, he told her the film was almost done. He said it in a way that she couldn't quite read, not excited, not relieved. She said he sounded like someone describing the end of something they hadn't expected to survive. She didn't ask him what he meant. She's thought about that a lot since. The house in New Mexico had been empty for 3 years before Marcus rented it. The owner, a retired engineer named Carol Pitt, had moved out of it in 2016 and refused to discuss why in any of the subsequent interviews. He would only say that the house had a quality he couldn't describe accurately and that he charged Marcus $100 a month because he wanted someone in it. He felt that an occupied house was safer than an empty one. Safer for who, he wouldn't say. Marcus moved in with 2 suitcases, a camera, a laptop, and a chest freezer full of food. He told Carol Pitt he expected to be there for 18 months. He stayed for 4 years. Neighbors in the area, and there weren't many, the nearest house was 2 miles east, reported seeing lights in the property at unusual hours, 2 or 3 in the morning, sometimes later. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Grace Aldecoa, said she drove past the house on an errand one night and saw the main room lit up at an hour she described as the wrong time to be awake. She said the light had a quality she didn't like. She couldn't say more than that. The quality of the light. She didn't like it. Nobody knocked on the door. Nobody checked in. Out there, in the high desert, that was considered a form of respect. The film survived. His colleague David Park drove out to the house 2 weeks after Marcus stopped responding to messages. He found the car in the driveway. The property was locked. Through the front window, he could see a single tape sitting on the table in the main room. He called the police. When they entered, the house was undisturbed. Nothing broken. Nothing overturned. No signs of a struggle or any incident. The only things that hadn't been there when Marcus moved in were the tape and a single chair that had been positioned in the center of the main room, facing the wall. The tape was labeled in Marcus's handwriting. 2 words. the interior. David Park watched it first. He said the film ran for 73 minutes. He said it was unlike anything he had seen. Not in a technical sense, not in the sense of being well-made or innovative, but in the sense that watching it produced a physical response in him that he couldn't explain afterward. A kind of low, sustained dread that built over the runtime without any single moment he could point to and say, "That's when it started." The film had no plot, no characters, no dialogue, no music. It was a single location, the hallway of the New Mexico house, shot from a fixed camera angle, adjusted slightly between sessions, capturing the same stretch of corridor over and over in the hours before dawn. The light through the window changed across the sessions, sometimes blue, sometimes closer to gray. The silence on the audio track was the silence of a house that was very still and very awake at the same time. David Park said nothing happened in the film. He kept saying that. Nothing happens. There is no movement. There are no sounds that don't belong. There are no figures visible for 72 minutes and 58 seconds of runtime. And then the final 2 seconds. In the last frame before the tape cuts to black, at the far end of the hallway, there is a figure. It is not moving. It appears to be standing, though David Park said the proportions were wrong in a way he kept trying and failing to describe clearly. He settled eventually on this. It looked like something that was shaped like a person, but had not yet fully decided to be one. He said he watched those 2 seconds 7 times before he made himself stop. He said it didn't feel like he was watching something. It felt like something was allowing him to look at it, and that the distinction mattered in a way he couldn't articulate. The tape was transferred to a digital file. A film archivist named Sandra Osei was brought in to assess it. She reviewed the footage over 2 sessions, requested the final frames specifically, and arranged for them to be sent to a digital forensics laboratory for analysis. She watched those final 2 seconds 6 times. Then she stopped as well. When Sandra Osei was asked later what specifically made her stop watching, she paused for a long time before answering. She said it was the way the figure was positioned. She said it wasn't facing the camera. It was angled slightly away, the way you might stand if you were listening for something in another room. She said it felt like the figure wasn't aware of being filmed. And then she said she couldn't keep watching because she was afraid of the moment it might turn around. She never found out whether it did. She didn't go back to the footage after that. The forensics laboratory received the files the following week. The analysis took 3 weeks. David Park described waiting for the report as one of the stranger experiences of his life, not knowing whether he wanted the explanation to be technical and simple, or whether that outcome would somehow be worse. The forensics report was thorough. It ruled out every technical explanation methodically and in order. The figure had not been added in post-production. It was not a reflection from any surface in the hallway. It was not a lens artifact. It was not a shadow produced by any object in the frame. The pixel density was consistent with the rest of the image, meaning it had been captured by the camera at the same moment as everything else in the shot. The figure cast a shadow. The shadow was the detail that the forensics team returned to repeatedly in the report's conclusions, because the shadow fell in a direction that no light source in the hallway could account for. Every other shadow in the frame was consistent with the window light. This one was not. This shadow implied that whatever was standing at the far end of that corridor was lit from a direction and by a source that was not physically present in the room. The report's final conclusion was unambiguous. The figure was physically present in the hallway on the night Marcus Webb filmed it. There was no technical explanation for what it was or how it came to be there. The report recommended further investigation of the property. The property was investigated. A team spent 2 days at the house looking for any structural, environmental, or human explanation for the figure. They found nothing. No evidence of any other occupant at any point during Marcus's tenancy. No trapdoors. No adjacent spaces that could have been accessed without Marcus's knowledge. No explanation for the shadow. The contractor hired to conduct a separate structural inspection of the building stopped his work partway through the first day and told the investigator he wouldn't continue alone. He called 2 colleagues to join him for the second visit and didn't explain why to either of them until they were back in the car afterward. He told them he had been standing at the end of the hallway taking measurements when he became certain there was someone behind him. He turned around. The hallway was empty, but the certainty didn't leave. He said it followed him out of the house and sat in the car with him while he waited for them to arrive, and he didn't feel it go until they were a mile down the road. The investigation was closed without conclusion. Carol Pitt, the owner of the property, was informed of the report's findings. He did not seem surprised. He said only that he had charged Marcus $100 a month because he wanted someone in it, and that he supposed he should have been more specific about what kind of someone he'd had in mind. He sold the property shortly after. He declined to say what he received for it. The house was demolished in November 2022. The person who arranged the demolition later said in an interview that 3 separate contractors declined the job before he found one willing to take it. He said he didn't ask them why. He said by that point, he preferred not to know. The footage of the interior was acquired by a private collector in the spring of 2023. He paid for it through an intermediary and has not disclosed what he paid. In a single written interview, the only one he has given, he confirmed that he has not watched the footage. He stores it in a room in his house that he does not otherwise use. He said he keeps the room locked, not to protect the footage. For a reason he declined to state. When the interviewer asked why he had purchased something he intended never to watch, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said this: "I bought it because whoever was standing in that hallway, whatever Marcus captured in those last 2 seconds, I don't think it knew the camera was on. And I think that's the only reason Marcus got out alive." The interviewer asked him to clarify what he meant by alive. He didn't answer that question. Marcus Webb has not been found. His case remains officially open. There have been no confirmed sightings, no contact with anyone who knew him, no activity on any of his accounts or documents since the Friday morning he disappeared. He is, by every measurable standard, simply gone. What I keep returning to, the thing I cannot resolve no matter how many times I go back over the details, is the tape. Marcus labeled it before he disappeared. He wrote the title on it in his own handwriting and left it on the table in the center of the room, positioned where it would be seen from outside the window. Which means he watched it. He saw the footage. He saw what was standing at the end of that hallway. He watched those final 2 seconds, and he knew what was in them. And then, he chose to leave the tape behind in a place where someone would find it. That was a decision. The last decision Marcus Webb made. He wanted someone to see it. I've thought a long time about whether that was a warning, or an invitation, or a record, evidence left by someone who understood that what they'd captured was important and didn't want it to disappear when they did. I don't know which one it was. I'm not sure it matters. I'm not sure there's a version of this where it ends well for the person who finds out. Do you think Marcus knew what he filmed? Yes or no? Next week, on The Last Frame, the film was destroyed. Every copy, every print, every duplicate. Someone made sure of it. Except one copy survived, in a place no one thought to look, and someone had been watching it for 30 years before anyone found out. That story is darker than this one.